Hi guys, hello and welcome to Jazz Across the Pond. Jazz Interviews Reimagined, a brand new and a very, very exciting bringing together of two great nations. Is jazz talking like you've never seen or heard it before? Now let's bring on my partner in crime. So here he is, my partner in crime from the other side of the pond. A very good evening, sir.
Well, good evening, Jazz Cat. How are you?
I'm better. Oh, I'm fine. I tell you what, if I was any better, it would be a crime.
It still might be a crime.
So it's a warm welcome to Jazz Across the Pond from me, Roger Lee, aka the Jazz Cat.
And I'm Kevin Goolsby, and they call me Mr. G.
Mr. G. Mr. G, the salt to my pepper.
The salt to your pepper. Roger, of all the duos you could have selected, the Righteous Brothers, the Everly Brothers, Sam and Dave, Simon and Garfunkel, for Pete's sake, you pick Salt and Pepper?
But for a different reason.
Why is that?
You'll have to wait until I elaborate during our interview tonight. I'm going to surprise you with my useless pieces of information. I tell you what, it's a pinch of salt. It's salt over my shoulder. Don't worry about it. We're going to have a great...
Oh, you're not talking about the duo Salt and Pepper.
Oh, no.
You're talking about Salt and Pepper.
Wait and find out. Anyway, I've got two words to say to you.
Okay.
Paul Brown.
That's it?
Yep. Over to you.
Well, that's a mouthful. Paul Brown's a two-time Grammy-winning producer, composer, arranger, guitarist, and vocalist, I might add, who spent his early years as a drummer before moving into the studio under the guidance of his brother-in-law, the legendary engineer, Mr. Lee Hirschberg. Talk about a mentor. Don't forget, Lee won the 1966 Grammy Award for Best Engineered Recording for Frank Sinatra's monster hit, Strangers in the Night. Amazing.
And how is it you know so much about this man?
Paul Brown or Frank Sinatra?
No, Paul Brown.
Paul Brown and I have been friends on Facebook all the way back to the beginning of the Smooth Jazz Train back in 2011.
Okay.
But he goes way back. He started off really as a session player, and it wasn't until his first debut project Up Front that he literally stepped up front and became the lead in the rest of its history. He made his mark obviously as a producer, but as a musician is when he finally stepped up.
Yeah, but of course, all this information and a lot more can be found on last week's interview on Jazz Across the Pond.
Absolutely. We share a lot more than that, but we don't want to give too much away.
Oh, no. What an amazing interview. A wonderful gentleman. It was great to get him away from the golf course, the recording studio, and a tremendous wine connoisseur as well. And it was just lovely to have a chat with him. It's, ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond followers, it's all there. Last week's interview, we were enamored the fact that he took time out to join us. And even more to the point, he watches our show. How about that?
He does. He was sitting there with his guitar wanting to know whose birthday was it again?
Yeah.
Of course, now, if you've not been following all of our shows, you'll definitely be a little more clear. But what Paul was talking about was Lisa Addio 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
In conjunction with Mr. Wise Guy, they played Happy Birthday to Mr. G. It was quite a shock. But Paul Brown even commented on it. So we know he watches the show, or he wouldn't have known that.
Absolutely. Anyway, that show is available like all other shows. They're all available. Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined, Roger Lee, the Jazz Cat, and Kevin Goolsby, Mr. G. They're all available, and there's a host. And boy, have we got some big names coming up. We've got some big hitters coming, including tonight's artist.
Amazing. This is we've got 4 amazing artists in a row. You've got to catch all these shows, people.
Absolutely. So tonight's show, and he contacted me last night. He went, Roger, looking forward to it. I'm on a ranch at the moment, looking out of the fields with cows and dogs and horses. He said, tranquil. And I went, he's going to be so relaxed when we talk to him tonight.
Well, that'll be interesting. Bromberg is always high energy. So if he's kicking back a little bit, it should be a smooth ride.
Absolutely. Well, what we're going to do then, because I know a lot of jazz connoisseurs will go, Brian Bromberg, wow, these guys have got some names coming. But there may be a few just going, Brian Bromberg, I should know this name. Well, I tell you, by the end of this interview, you will know this name. That's and right. What we're going to do, we're going to give you a taster. We're going to give you like an aperitif before a meal, because this one tonight, we're going to play a track from his 2012 album. I love all his albums. He's got something like 24 solo albums. The one that we've selected is this one here. The album is called Compared to That. And we're going to play, does anybody know really what time it is? I mean, wonderful title of a song.
I don't have a watch on, so I don't know.
I have. So sit back, listen to this, and then maybe Mr. Bromberg will tell us what time it is, even though we're on 3 different time zones. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jazz Across the Pond. We are here. Sit back and get ready. Take your shoes off, do a bit of toe tapping, because this one is big. Here we are, Brian Bromberg.
Hey, this is jazz bassist and record producer Brian Bromberg coming to you from sunny California. You are watching me on Jazz Across the Pond with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. I hope you enjoy.
Hey!
Can you hear us, Brian?
Yeah, hey, how you doing?
Hey,
Good,
how
brother.
you doing?
All is well. Well, that's, look at, my God, CDs and a whole bunch of them. Wow.
Is it?
I remember those
It's not
days.
at first I thought you had a tortoiseshell Persian there for a second.
This is Peanut Girl. She was rescued in an alley in Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Well, now don't let the Jazz Cat see too much of that now.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jazz Across the Pond, we've just been toe tapping like mad to the most wonderful big band piece. It is an incredible track. It's Mr. Brian Bromberg from his 2012 album, Compared to That, and aptly titled, does anybody really know what time it is? Well, there's a man here waiting now, could probably answer that question because we're on 3 different time zones talking to you. Ladies and gentlemen, wow. What can we say about this week's very, very special guest, a multi-talented American jazz bassist and record producer? He is considered iconic, very influential, recognizable, revered, the Rembrandt of the bass world. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me as we welcome Jazz Across the Pond, and we warmly welcome all the way from California, the man himself, Mr. Brian Bromberg.
Like the Rembrandt of the jazz. I mean, wow. Usually I paint with a roller, not, anyway. That was very sweet.
Well,
Thank you. Great to be here. And I have no idea what time it is. I'm not wearing a watch. So there you go.
Yeah, well, you've got fine brush strokes, so I think Rembrandt fits beautifully.
We got a lot. We got a lot together. You've got your lovely cat there, so you got the Jazz Cat here, so it's all good.
Yeah, she Peanut Girl. She lives on my desk, and she just comes and sits in my lap, and she's always here, which is awesome.
Very calming influence.
She's free to interject anytime she wishes. So.
She probably will.
Knowing her. The cat is a very calming influence, yes?
Yes.
No, she's great. Yeah, we have a lot of rescues, so they're
good for you.
All animals are wonderful. We have 4 horses, we have dogs, we have cats. It's they're all rescues. It's pretty amazing.
Good for you. Good for you.
Okay, here we go then. So, first of all, I'm going to apologize. At the bottom of the screen here, I've got the name Natasha Jade. She's my daughter, and she's the editor of the screen. I had a slight technical problem with my computer last night, and so Natasha, bless her, went, use mine. So I'm not Natasha Jade. I'm Roger Lee, all right? Let's just clarify that.
All right, no problem.
I don't want people looking, going, he looks a strange Natasha Jade. Anyway, Brian, our researchers on both sides of the pond have done a sterling job this week in compiling all the information about your good self. Born and raised in Tucson, Arizona, you came from a very musical family where your father and your brother, both drummers. Now,
Yes.
on the Jazz Across the Pond, Kevin and myself, over the last so many months, everybody we interview, they come to us in the opening statement. They usually say, I started playing when I was 4 years old or 5 years old or 6 years old. And we even had one started when they were 12 years old. But you are going to have the record. We're going to hand you the gauntlet. You got the record because you actually started playing when you were 2.5 and really started to learn the drums at the age of 4. At the age of 12, you were playing 2 nights a week gigging. Please tell our followers more about this wonderful experience.
Actually, I was actually playing 4 nights a week when 12 and 13 years old in Tucson. I was gigging. I was in a band and we were gigging 4 nights a week. It was crazy. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It was wonderful. Growing up in a town like that was great for me because it was a big enough of a city to have everything that a big city has, yet it's a small enough of a town where there's only, a small group of musicians that were there to do everything. So we were working all the time. And the level of musicianship there was actually quite good. So that was it was just a wonderful environment to grow up in because everybody I played with, everything you can imagine I played, and it was a wonderful way to grow up. And thank God my family used to drive me to gigs because I was too young to be in the bar. So in fact, at some of the places that I would play, if I was on stage playing, it was cool. But then on the break, I literally had to go wait outside because I was too young to be in the bar if it wasn't a restaurant serving food. So it's like, okay, you got to go out, and then I'd come back in. So I'm on my breaks, I'm like standing outside going, great, this is wonderful. But it was a great experience growing up that way for sure.
that sounds. Kevin was just pointing to me because he knows that I started doing discos at the age of 12 illegally, and they had to put me near the fire escape. So if any police came in, they pushed me at the fire escape. I was out the bags.
Right. Yeah, you needed a quick exit. Yep, I get it. But
Absolutely.
It's cool. It's wonderful to have those experiences young, and it helps shape you, and it gave me the confidence to pursue a career in music. And on the flip side, it's like I'm 12, 13 years old. I'm already working doing it. So it was really great to okay, I'm actually earning money playing music. It was really wonderful.
Well, talking about early influences, I mean, we discovered that you began playing the cello in elementary school, but from what I understand, without a lot of enthusiasm. I'm not saying that you held the cello in contempt, Brian, but your approach to the instrument was described as if you were attempting to saw the cello in half.
Oh yeah, that's what the cello would tell me. Yes.
But in a stroke of good fortune, your middle school orchestra instructor suggested you take up the double bass, given your understanding of rhythm as a drummer and, of course, melody with the cello. And this was the beginning of your love affair with the double bass. Interestingly enough, though, not too long after switching to the double bass, you're thunderstruck by a recording of the legendary American jazz singer Sarah Vaughan, described as bop's greatest diva, whose voice, range, and perfect intonation captured your imagination and changed the direction of your musical life forever. If you would, share with our viewers what happened in that magical moment when you heard the mesmerizing voice of Miss Sarah Vaughan for the first time.
Well, the thing about her, I loved her voice because it was deep, it was resonant, it was powerful, it was earthy, it was soulful, it was smooth, it was just lush and warm, and just the way she phrased things. I mean, she laid back. I mean, she phrased things in just an incredible way, and there was just something about her that really struck me. And her musicians were always fantastic. And it was this record, Sarah Vaughan Live in Japan, and it was just something about it that was just magical. The record was great, and the bass player, a guy named John Gianelli, who I got to know in Los Angeles, a really good bass player, played really in tune, really inspired me, and to hear her voice and his bass together was like, wow, this is really amazing, because it was so melodic, and it really inspired me melodically. But as a singer, she just was silky, sexy, sultry, just amazing. And I got to play with her once. It was kind of a dream come true. And it was a very accidental situation on a gig. And she came and she sat in with us because she knew the other guys in the band. And she literally did almost the entire set. She was loving every minute of it. And it was great. I was just like, man, Sarah Vaughan. It's like, that's Sarah Vaughan. And the thing that was cool is, you can listen to somebody on record or even hear them live and be inspired, and it's wonderful. But until you actually make music with them and create it on the spot, it's in that moment of doing it that you realize, wow, I get who they are. Now I understand it. And playing those songs with her live, my respect for her chops musically just exponentially grew in creating music with her live, because I realized how good her ears were. And she didn't sing like a singer. She sang like an incredible jazz improviser who sang. And just her approach to the music, it was mesmerizing, because it's like, oh my God, I get it now. It's like, just like when I was fortunate enough to play with Herbie Hancock, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, I really get it. It's like, now I understand what that level of artistry and musicianship is. Because you can listen to it on the record and it's like, man, that's burning, that's great, it's wonderful. But not until you feel it, and not until you play it with the person and experience what they bring as a human, that takes it to a whole new level. So,
and Brian, I played two musical instruments all the way through college, and I've shared this with Roger. There's nothing like playing music with other people. It's not that you take pride in what you're doing as an individual. You're taking pride in what you're doing collectively, and especially when everybody's in the pocket. It's a profound experience. I mean, I actually was close to being moved to tears sometimes during performances. I was so impacted by just that camaraderie and that feel you get playing with your brothers.
It's overwhelming. I mean, it can be when the artistry and the musicianship level is that high. It is absolutely overwhelming because you can't put it into words, because the spirit and the everybody owns who they are and what they bring, and when you have all those people at that level bringing that type of ownership of who they are together at the same time, there is nothing else like it. It's truly amazing. And I got to tell you, with COVID-19, it's been 1.5 years since I've played any music with another human being. This is the longest period of time in my life I've gone without making music live with people, for people. And I can't even put it into words. It is the weirdest. It is the weirdest experience and the weirdest thing to not be doing what you love doing, because when you're doing it and everybody's in that same space, it's like, my God. And let's face it, that's what jazz is, right? That's what jazz is about, that spontaneous creativity in the moment. And it's hard not to have those moments, right?
Absolutely. Well, talking about moments, we're going to take it back to some touch now. In 1979, a certain Mr. Mark Johnson, the bassist working for the jazz wonderful pianist Bill Evans, had heard of yourself playing. And then Johnson later suggested that you join Stan Getz.
Yeah.
It was searching for a new bass player. Getz took a look at you, had a listen to you, auditioned you, and hey, you joined the band. You were there and you did 6 years. Only 6 years after picking up the bass, you were working with Stan Getz. Please tell our followers more about that wonderful breakthrough.
Yeah, it was crazy. Bill Evans came to Tucson to do a week of clinics, concerts, and workshops. And of course, I hung out and heard everything that he did. And Mark Johnson was his bass player at the time. And Mark was great. And we hung out, we got to be friends, and we played and we spent time together. And it was just really great. It was just so nice to be around musicians of that caliber. And 7 months later, literally 7 months later, he calls me up on the phone out of the clear blue, and he's like, "Hey man, Stan Getz is probably going to be calling you tomorrow. I recommended you for his band." And I'm like, "Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, And it's snowing and it's 105 degrees outside. It's like, okay. And then I said, "Thank you. That's really awesome." And I just like, that's it. And the next day, I'm rehearsing with my local band in Tucson, and my mom comes in and she's like, "Brian, Stan Getz is on the phone for you." And the sax player in the band literally almost passed out. He had to sit down, and I was flipping out. I was nervous. I mean, come on, it's Stan Getz. He's like one of the legends of jazz calling me in Tucson, Arizona, and I'm 18. I had no idea that at 18 years old, I was that good. I really didn't know. All I wanted to do was be the best I could be. I practiced, I worked really hard. I had no bar of where I was just because of of being in Tucson. I mean, I knew I was the best bass player in town, but it's Tucson, Arizona. I'm hanging out with cactus. It's like, I have no idea if I can play or not. I really don't know. So just the fact that I got recommended to the gig was pretty astounding. But yeah, I mean, he wanted me to come to New York and auditioned, and I did. I flew to New York with my bass back in the day when you could fit an acoustic bass in the seat next to you and coach. Those days are long gone. But yeah, I was, all of a sudden, I was like, I'm auditioning with Stan Getz, and I'm like playing with his band in the piano player's bedroom of his apartment, because that's where the piano was. I was completely freaking out. But what I found out afterwards was that he hired me after the first chorus of Autumn Leaves, which was the first tune. And literally after like 16 bars.
That's awesome.
Of mental anguish. I didn't even know I had the gig. I do the whole audition, and he makes me like sit there and wait. He goes, the guys, we're gonna go talk in the other room. So literally, 45 minutes later after playing, he takes the guys into the piano player's bedroom. They shut the door, and they were in there for like an hour. And I'm like, what the heck? And I find all this out afterwards. They basically just watch TV just to put me through changes. They're hanging out because he already knew he was going to hire me. So, and then they come out and it was like, "Yeah, man, it was great, blah, blah, blah." And that was it. He left. And I'm like, I know nothing. And I didn't even know I got the gig until he calls me up, like a week later or something like that. And he's like, "Brian, do you have a passport?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "Well, get a passport. You get one." So I guess I got the gig if I need a passport, and that was it. So it was some old school jazz stuff, that's for sure. But it was an amazing experience. It was just remarkable. It was great.
Well, Brian, continuing in the same vein of influential moments when music caused you to shift gears, we understand that you heard the track Portrait of Tracy, composed by the late great legendary American bassist player John Francis Anthony Jaco Pastorius III. And for those few viewers who watch our shows religiously, most of them know it, but Jaco was a member of one of the best electric jazz bands of all time, one of my favorites, Weather Report. He was with them from 76 to 81. And he also worked with Pat Metheny and Joni Mitchell. Now, interestingly enough, a little personal note, speaking of Pastorius and Metheny, in 1975, during my senior year at the College of William and Mary in Virginia, I heard a 1974 self-titled album by a quartet called Pastorius, Metheny, Ditmas, and Blay. Little did I know at that time that two of those four cats would ultimately become legends of electric jazz. But if you would, please tell us about Jaco Pastorius and also Stanley Clarke and how their playing styles inspired you to add the electric bass to your repertoire.
Well, you know, it's interesting because I was truly an acoustic bass purist. You know, when I got into playing bass, it was the double bass, was the upright, and I played a lot of classical music and I played jazz, and that was it. I did not listen to electric music. I don't know why. I just, you know, maybe because the acoustic is so organic and it's just real and there's air and, you know, I've been blessed. I've got a 300-year-old Italian bass, and it's like, you know, this bass is made from wood that's probably 500 years old. And it's like, you know, there's something about it that I just couldn't even think of playing electric music. It's like this thing like made in in a factory, you know, it's like, you know, it's like, there's like no soul to it. At least that's what I thought back then. And then I heard Jaco, and then I heard Portrait of Tracy, and like all the cool stuff on Jaco's record. I mean, it's amazing, Donna Lee, all that great stuff. But I heard Portrait of Tracy, and that just completely blew my mind. That had never been done before. I mean, yes, there were guys that had chops and technique and could play lines and things like that. No one had ever done anything with harmonics, and that, when I heard that, that just completely blew my mind, and that changed my whole perception of the electric bass. It was like, my God, that's beautiful music. That gets me in my soul. It's real. And that experience got me into the electric bass. So he was a huge influence of mine. And fortunately, we actually got to hang out several times and jam together. And he was really cool to me. In fact, he heard me play in Florida. I used to play with the great Jamaican jazz pianist, Monty Alexander. Oh. And we were playing at a place called Arthur's Steakhouse. I think it was in Fort Lauderdale. I mean, we're talking a long time ago. Right. And apparently, I didn't know this, but Jaco came to the gig and was there the entire night, sat in the back, did not come say hello, didn't introduce himself. He was there, and I didn't find out until afterwards. And hanging with him, he's like, "Yeah, man, I know you. I heard you. I went blah, blah, blah." And he's like, I'm like, Jaco Pastorius is calling me amazing and all this stuff. And he was at my gig. Had I known he was there, you would have had to have called the paramedics. There's no way. I couldn't even function if I knew he was there. My fingers wouldn't have moved, you know, but it was cool. We got to play a few times and hang out, and he was a huge inspiration to me. And so was Stanley Clarke. And the thing that was cool about Stanley is, you know, Stanley played upright, and his upright playing was phenomenal. And he to this day still has the most unusual, identifiable sound on the acoustic bass. He's got an identity that nobody has. So he was a huge inspiration to me. And what's really a trip with Stanley, it's like, you know, Stanley and Jaco to me were like, they were the rock stars of the bass. They were like, those are the guys, that was it. And then I remember when I was with Stan Getz, we were playing the North Sea Jazz Festival in Holland. This was 1980, right? So this is 1980, it was a long time ago. And we're in the hotel, and the festival at this point was a huge European jazz festival in Holland, the Northeast Festival, and it's days, and there's one big host hotel, and like all the stars are hanging out in the hotel. Back in those days, it's Miles Davis. It's like, I mean, it is literally the biggest stars in jazz. So I'm in the lobby of the hotel seeing all these people, and I'm freaking out because remember, just a few months before that, I was this kid in Tucson, Arizona, dreaming of these guys. And now I'm like in the hotel and they're all just hanging out, and I'm like in one of the bands. And then I remember Stanley Clarke got paged, And when I heard him being paged in the paging system, it's like I almost had a heart attack, flipping out. So it's funny, I haven't thought of this story in a very long time. So Stanley Clarke is like 15 feet away, eating lunch. He's got this huge plate of French fries, and I just remember eating French fries, and it's just like I'm sitting there just going, Stanley Clarke is right there. Oh my God. It's like, screw it. I'm nervous. I'm flipping out. And the thing that was really cool is, and I introduced myself, I said, yeah, I'm playing with Stan Getz, blah, blah, blah. What was really cool was that Stanley played with Stan Getz when he was 18, 19 years old, just like me, 10 years earlier. Wow. So we instantly had a bond of like, we're right. So we spent the entire day and night together, the whole day. We played, we hung, we had dinner together, we hung out. He came up, he played my bass, and I showed him my bass book from Stan's band, and he's like, wow, that's my writing. That's my I wrote that out. You know, like there were still notes that he wrote on paper from when he was in the band. And he's like, you know, here's like 500 Miles High by Chick Corea, his original pencil. Whoops, sorry, it froze. Chick Corea's original handwritten pencil chart of 500 Miles High, stuff like that, like this really crazy stuff. So anyway, that's how Stanley and I connected. Brilliant. And we've been friends ever since. Yeah.
Brian, and you've already mentioned very nicely, as most jazz artists, my den of iniquity with all my CDs behind it.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Yeah, right. I don't know if you can see over here, there's an entire gap there, all right? That gap there, that's your CDs. All 24 of your CDs in there. And you were talking about, Jacko, you did 2 wonderful albums, A Tribute and Jacko. They're incredible albums. So we're going to put them over there. And I'll tell you, we're talking about CDs. We're now going to take a very, very quick momentary break to have a listen. This is a track from your brand new album. I had to make space in the wall for it, okay? So this is...
how old I am. How many records I got, right?
This is a great album. It's called A Little Driving Music. We're going to take a very quick break from this. We'll be straight back. The track we've chosen, quite appropriate, because we were talking about the difficulty we're all experiencing with COVID-19 and the restriction, the constraints on everything. We're going to pick Quarantine, because I just felt it was so, I don't know whether you actually, you know, did that because of that reason, but it is a fabulous track. Ladies and gentlemen, we're watching the wonderful Brian Bromberg and his cat. We're watching, and it's Brian Bromberg, track from his brand new album, Little Driving Music. We'll be straight back with Jazz Across the Pond. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Jazz Across the Pond, Jazz Interviews Reimagined with the Jazz Cat and Mr. G. You've been listening to the wonderful track Quarantine from the exciting new project, A Little Driving Music, by our special guest, Mr. Brian Bromberg. Now, Brian, if you would, it's interesting. We talked a little bit about, COVID-19 and the effects that it's had on a lot of us. And I think Roger obviously picked Quarantine for a reason. Could you expound on that just a little bit for us?
Yeah, it's when quarantine happened and everything just completely shut down here. I mean, basically you just couldn't do anything. That was the first song I wrote, and it just showed up, and it goes, knocks on the door. It's like, here it is, I'm writing. It's like, and I wrote the song, and it's like, wow, I really dig this tune. This tune is great. And then I ended up writing the entire record, and we did the entire record in quarantine, social distancing. Not one session on that record was done with more than one person recording at a time. And everybody would send their files in, and I produced everything and built it all in. But literally every track was recorded one at a time, including the big band, all the horns, the strings. There were some strings that were recorded in the Dominican Republic. And those were 5 people all set up very far apart in the studio there. And they just overdubbed several times, and I put it all together. Everything else was truly one track at a time. But Quarantine was the first song I wrote, and what got me to write the entire CD. And I love the tune. When I wrote the tune, it's just like, wow, this is a really cool tune. It's just like the tunes just show up. It's not like I write them; they just show up, and I just put them all together. So I can sit back and it's not like, yeah, man, I wrote the song. It's like I actually don't feel like I wrote the song. I feel like the song just came through me and I put it out. So when I sit back and go, wow, that's a great song, it's not that I'm great. It was like, that's a really great song, and I'm glad that it came to me, and I just kind of figured it all out. I mean, I really kind of feel like it's really not mine. I'm just like the conduit to bring it out. But I love the song. So cool. Thanks for playing it.
Well, great song and fantastic project. Now, Brian, I'm going to ask 2 questions if I might. I'll ask the second question after you following your response. But first, we've already talked about you have a prized possession, your 300-year-old Italian double bass. Yep. Please share with us how you came to own this exquisite instrument and how this glorious old masterpiece taught you how to play the bass.
Yeah. So remember, Tucson, Arizona, hanging out in the Sonoran Desert with the cactus. A friend of mine, I was 15 or 16. No, I think I was 15 at the time. And a drummer friend of mine that I was playing with, I talked to him all the time. We play out, together all the time. And he's like, yeah, hey, Brian, he goes, man, there's this old bass hanging up on the wall. And the name of the music store was Beaver's Bandbox. And that's the family name. Beaver was the guy's last name. So it's Beaver's Bandbox, And he said, yeah, there's this old bass hanging up above the cash register. You got to go check it out, man. It looks pretty cool. So I didn't have my driver's license yet. So I had my dad drive me to the store. And when I opened the door to go into the shop, they literally had the bass wedged up on the wall, like 10 feet up in the air, see it. And I swear to you, my knees got weak when I saw the bass just walking into the store. It's like, I had a visceral reaction to seeing this instrument. It's like, oh my God. And they took it down.
And hung with 3 nails.
Yeah. It's talk about disgraceful way to treat, an instrument.
I know. Oh
but luckily they didn't hurt it. But I had to talk my dad into buying it because, it's like, they have no idea what they have. Trust me, Dad, trust me, they do not know what they have. I knew instruments, and it's like, I knew exactly what it was when I saw it. And it's like, they don't know what they got. Trust me, So I talked him into to buying it for me, which was great. And it changed my life. And I tell you, this instrument is the kind of instrument that is so much better than I will ever be. It's like this instrument can play so much better than a human can play it. And it took me several years before I felt I was good enough to actually play it, because I had to learn how to get a sound out of this instrument. Most people who pick it up and play it can't get a sound out of it. And it sounds gorgeous. And it taught me how to pull that sound out of my fingers into the instrument. And I've had this bass, since I was 16, but it was probably 2 or 3 years before I actually started playing it on a regular basis. Cause I I don't want to say I wasn't worthy. I just wasn't good enough. I just wasn't good enough yet. And then when I got good enough to start playing it, it then taught me how to play. I truly believe that.
Okay, well, Brian, my second question to you was, like yourself, Roger and I are both big fans, obviously, of Jaco, but also Jimi Hendrix and Joe Beam, whose their music has been the focus of 3 of your fantastic tribute projects. If you would share with our viewers a little bit about your 2-year journey you experienced with your 2012 tribute project, Bromberg Plays Hendrix. We understand it took 2 years, 2 different record producers from different parts of the world to bring it to fruition. Tell us that story, if you would.
It's a really interesting story because, I mean, I've always been a big Jimi Hendrix fan, but there was nothing on my radar in any way that I would ever think of doing a Jimi Hendrix record. It's like, I'm a jazz bass player. Why am I going to do a Jimi Hendrix record? I just wouldn't even think. It would be like me doing, I'm going to do a record about light poles. You just wouldn't think about it. It's just not something you think about. So I'm having lunch one day with a record company executive from New York, and he was in LA, doing business, and I met him for lunch, and literally out of the clear blue, he's like, man, he goes, you should do a Jimi Hendrix record. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, because you should do a Jimi Hendrix record. He said, nobody can do it like you. You should, and he was just like on me, and I'm looking at him like, are you kidding me? Like Jimi Hendrix record? So I listened to him, and it was cool, and then I changed the subject. It's like, okay, fine. And then literally, if I'm not mistaken, like 2 years later, I was having a conversation with another record company executive, this time from King Records in Japan, and Jimi Hendrix record. And it just stopped me in my tracks because, whoa, all right, hold on a second here. I got 2 guys who don't know each other, both in the record business, 10,000 miles apart, 2 completely different cultures, saying the exact same thing. I better listen to this because they're obviously seeing and hearing something that I'm not. I better pay attention to this. And that's what did it. It's like, okay, I get it. So then I started listening to Hendrix's music, and then it was like, I could do that. That would be a blast. Oh, that would be cool. And then it happened. And I have to tell you, it's one of my favorite records that I've ever done because it's so much fun, and it's not your typical jazz record. It gave me a chance to really shred. It was also really cool because I didn't learn any Jimi Hendrix licks. I'm not trying to be a guitar player. I'm not a guitar player. I don't have to learn any of his stuff. For me, it was my take on his music, and I could do it my way. And it was really fun and liberating just to honor his music and do it kind of the way I wanted to do it, and not think of learning Hendrix licks, because why would I even try to learn a Jimi Hendrix lick, So it's a fun record. I got Vinnie Colaiuta playing drums, and he's the most ridiculous drummer on the planet, and he's going nuts. He cut the entire record in one session. He came over to my studio and literally just played the record down. It was like insane. And what I'm probably the most proud of the record is that the entire record is 2 people, and everything you hear is me on the different basses and Vinny on drums. And what's cool about it is that it still breathes. It still sounds like music. It still has peaks and valleys. It's still real, and it doesn't sound like, a demo. It doesn't sound like a NAMM show demo or something where you're stacking parts and parts and it's a loop and all this stuff. Even though it's entirely overdubbed, it still sounds like music. And for me, that I'm the most proud of that. And it's just really fun, and the playing's really good. I'm very happy with it. And we just did a remaster of it that just came out, and it sounds fantastic. Yeah, it's the new version is like killing. It sounds so much better. It's great. Yeah, it's really exciting.
I can concur with that. It is brilliant. That's what the cover looks like for our followers there. Go out and buy a copy. Yeah. We alluded to the Carlos Jobim, the Brazilian. Yeah. Now, I've got a question for you, Brian. Okay, then. On your 2006 album, Woods 2,
yes.
Right, I've got the whole collection here. And you recorded a cover of a 1975 Earth, Wind and Fire track, Shining Star. A short time later, you met the co-writer of this one, because it was written by Morris White, who of course formed the band, Philip Bailey, and keyboardist Larry Dunn, one of the original members of the band. Now the band, a lot of people don't realize it, but this goes back to our pre-interview with Kevin. The band started up in 1972 with Last Day and Time. That was their first ever album. But I don't know if you realize this shows that I'm a bit of an anorak when it comes to music. Before they were called Earth, Wind and Fire, they were called Salt and Peppery.
Oh wow! I had no idea.
Before, and for some reason, the record company turned around and went, "That's not a very good name for a band," and they changed to Earth, Wind and Fire. They were useless piece of information. Anyway, back to what we're saying. Larry Dunn, I'm a mind of useless information. Okay, then. Larry Dunn heard the piece and loved it. What did he say to you after hearing it?
Oh man, I remember playing it for him in my studio, and it was just like, hey man, you got to check this out. I got something to play for you. He's a really nice guy, and he's done a bunch of sessions at my studio over the years, and it's just like, you got to check this out. And no one's going to think of Shining Star like on upright bass. I mean, no one. It's one of those things you're just not going to think about. So he had no idea what I was going to play for him. And in order for me to, what I like to try to do when I do, I actually did an entire solo CD of acoustic bass, just bass. And what I try to do is, I'm an improviser. Yeah, hands, right. I play. I hit thank you for showing. That's great. That's the Japanese version. That's cool. I hit record and I play, and I improvise. And that's it. I don't usually work stuff out in advance. I don't like to stack things usually. I'm a jazz guy. I hit the record button and I go for it. And the thing about Shining Star is, because of the composition, and there are a few really identifiable parts in the song, it was impossible for me to play all those at the same time. I only got two hands. So I ended up making it a conversation with myself, and I had to build it using three different parts. And the way I did it is I did a part on the left, a part in the middle, and a part on the right. So all parts were separated so you can hear each individual part. So when I played it for Larry, it's like I covered all the parts that needed to be covered. And the best part about playing it for Larry was just seeing the look on his face, because he was cracking up the entire time I was playing it. He was just laughing. His grin was like, like the Joker and Batman, it was just so cute. He just was, I mean, it was laughter with love. It was like, he really dug it. Right. It's like, wow, this is so cool. But I just cracked him up because it's a bass thing. It's kind of weird, Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, that's one of my favorite things on the record. It's very cool. And Earth, Wind and Fire is one of my favorite bands. I did another cover of theirs. I did September 1998, wow. 99. Yeah, I mean, I had a big hit with that, actually. Yeah. I had a big hit with that on the radio. Yeah, it's like, you talk about, the thing about that band that was so cool is that it was a pop R&B funk band that was disguised as a jazz band, or the other way around. It was a jazz band disguised as a pop R&B funk band. There's a lot of humanity in that band, and that's one of the things about them that I love so much.
Right. Before Kevin jumps into the question, another trivial use of information, Morris White used to play drums for Ramsey Lewis many, many years ago, before starting Earth, Wind and Fire.
Ah, there you go. Well,
another useful piece of information. I'll tell you what. Well, anyway, Ed, you were saying about the hands up. That was a Japanese import. Yep. Brian, I'm going to have to say that this album, Magic Rain, I couldn't get this album. I had to get it from a follower in Australia. I couldn't get it anywhere. And eventually, not for a reasonable price, and eventually one of our followers turned around and went, I know that. I do a radio show and that. And she contacted me, all the rest of it. So there it is. That's a well-traveled CD.
That's right. Very, very cool. Yeah, I can't even get it. It doesn't exist anymore. The record company in the business, I can't even get it. So it's, in fact, I have to look. I might have one or two somewhere, and that's it. I mean, I can't even get them. Yeah.
Well, that's dedication and devotion to you, sir.
Well, that's very sweet. Thank you.
Kevin, over to you. Oh, I must say, time is running out. We're going to have to cram this in, okay?
Okay, Brian, your collection of 24 solo albums is amazingly diverse, from smooth jazz projects utilizing the electric 4-string and 5-string bass guitars, to your piccolo bass on your aptly named 2005 project Metal, to acoustic double bass in the music of Carlos Jobim. As a gifted and technically astute composing bassist, You have successfully generated projects that effectively fall into multiple subgenres of jazz, and that's what we've been talking about. You play straight ahead jazz, jazz fusion, jazz funk, and smooth jazz, as well as the genres of instrumental rock and metal. If you would share with our viewers how the diversity of your projects has heightened your creativity, strengthened your passion for the bass, and your love of performing.
Well, you know, it's a great question, and in a lovely statement. Thank you. I mean, I equate it to food, right?
Exactly.
I love a lot of different kinds of food, but you know, do you want to eat the same meal 3 times a day?
All the time.
All the time? No, you want diversity. And I look at music the same way, especially with jazz, because there's so much you can do. So for me, you know, I try to be a well-rounded human being. I also want my music to be, you know, well-rounded as well, because I can have just as much fun, like the Joe Beam record's one of my favorite records in the world. You know, I can have, you know, just as much fun doing that as I can playing something really funky or something really bebop or whatever. It's all music. It's all honest. It's all real. And it's all a part of who you are. So for me, instead of being labeled as, oh, Brian does X, it's like, well, I'm not X as a human. I don't want to be X as a musician either. Right, you know? Right. So I like to do all these different styles and push the envelope of jazz and improvisation because it's challenging for me. I do it to challenge me. Right. And with the different tunings of the basses I do, getting them to sound like guitars and things like that, it really puts me in a place where I have to really rise to the occasion. You can't fake it when you're doing that. I don't want to sound like a bad guitar player. You know, I don't want to be like a circus, you know, sideshow. It's like, it's got to be right. It's got to be musical, and good enough is never good enough. If I'm going to do something, it has to be to the best of my ability, or why am I doing it? So I like the challenge of doing these different projects with different directions and different vibes, because it forces me to be better. And it forces me to grow. And that's, and I do it lovingly, selfishly, you know, and I hope people like listening to it. You know, the challenge that I've had is that it's hard to develop an identity when you do 5 records and all 5 of them sound like different artists. That has been the downfall, in a sense, of my career, because if you listen to the Joe Beam record and then listen to the Hendrix record and then listen to Full Circle, or, you know, or Hands, and then listen to, you know, the new record that just came out, you know, Little Driving Music, it sounds like 4 or 5 different artists, because they're all very different with different instruments. So it's hard for people to go, oh, boom, that's Brian Bromberg. On the flip side, when I look at the big picture and take the high altitude view of it, it's incredibly rewarding for me as an artist to keep challenging myself to do these different things. And I just hope people go along for the ride and appreciate it for what it is versus for what it's not. Like everything sounds like this, which might make you more famous and you build a different kind of career. But for me, I think it's very rewarding to do all these different things.
Right. See, Brian, that's what Roger and I love about your music. I know for both of us, it's not the same old, same old. We get excited when you've got a new project because we know we're going to hear something different, unique, and solid. So
thank you very much.
Now, conscious we have time, the curtain is slowly coming down, but we've got a couple of really good questions I need to ask you. You mentioned about Full Circle, again, another brilliant album showing a different style yourself. But then also, how about the BBB album? Now, that was a standard album. That was a great album with David Benoit and Greg
Bissonette.
Yeah, a great album. Absolutely love that album.
That was live. Well, if I'm not mistaken, that was live one day in the studio. Live the 2-track one day in the studio. Yep. Boom. Yep.
Okay. Now, I got a quick question for yourself. Yes. We know that you are very good friends with a man that I just hold up there like yourself, Mr. David Foster. Oh, yeah. You're very, very good friends. Now, I've been in David Foster. I can hear a Chicago average white band. I can hear, and I can tell you, I can say exactly exactly. That's David Foster production. It's got it written all over it. The autobiography is The Hitman. Now, it's brilliant, but this is loose to because I know he told you once, he said the best way to get the best out of a recording artist is to have a controlled environment. And I think there's an article in this book here which alludes to the fact that he once took a recording to the wonderful Quincy Jones. And as David Foster met Quincy Jones, he actually apologized. He said, Quincy, have a listen to this. It's not exactly right yet. I'm still, fine. And Quincy Jones went, David, stop. Come back when it's done. I don't want to hear it in that stage then. And it really taught David Foster a lot. He was like, Oh, Quincy Jones is saying that. And it's very, very true. So David Foster, yourself, very, very good friends. What did he mean by that? And what did you take from that statement from him?
Well, it's really interesting that you bring that up, because I'm working with Foster so many times. Foster has evolved in a way. Now, what Quincy meant by that is he's like, I don't want to hear something that's not going to be there. Like, don't give me something that it's like a demo of a vibe and everything's going to be replaced and it's going to be something else. Quincy wanted to like, give me the best picture of what this picture is going to look like. Give me the best view of what this is going to be. I don't want to hear a whole bunch of demo or fake parts and blah, 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 and it's all going to be replaced. So I understand where Quincy was coming from. On the flip side, stuff that I've done with Foster, and you made me think of something. So I did a session that David Foster was producing with this young singer, songwriter, guitar player. And on the session was Greg Fillingames, Steve Lukather, Vinnie Colaiuta, myself, and another like ridiculous studio star, and me. And we were the band trying to do this song that this kid wrote. He's a singer-songwriter guy. And it's like, you know, you've got 4 or 5 of the greatest studio musicians, players in the world, right? And we're doing this, and we try a few different takes. We try this, and Foster goes, nah, you know, it's just not right. He goes, come here, come with me. And we go outside. He's got one of those little boom boxes and a cassette. And he takes this cassette and he puts it in, and it's the demo that this kid did of a song. And it's literally him playing guitar and singing with a microphone into a cassette deck. And he's playing the demo of the song, and he's looking at like the 5 best studio musicians on the planet. And he's listening to this demo, and he's like, we can't do that. Listen to what he's doing on there. We can't replicate that. And that was just a mind-blowing moment for me of David hearing who this kid was, hearing what hearing what was really in this song coming out from just him and his guitar and nothing else. And he's like, I want to replicate that, and we can't, with the best musicians in the world. That blew my mind. So when you think about it from a demo, there's nothing in that demo but a guy singing into a, you know, playing guitar and singing. So there's many different ways of looking at that. But you know, I will tell you from working with Foster, one of the things about him that I love so much, his ears are just unbelievable. He hears everything. He's got perfect pitch. I mean, he hears everything. He knows exactly what he wants. And 99 times out of 100, he's 100% correct. And the one time he's not, when he's in the right environment, he gets it and he understands, I screwed up. I don't, you know. And you look at his track record. You go into a studio and it's floor to ceiling platinum records on all sides. It's like 500 million records he sold as a producer or a songwriter, as an artist. And Michael Bublé and Celine Dion. I mean, the list, Madonna, Michael Jackson. I mean, the list of people that he's been involved with is just Streisand. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So I love working with him because it's always the best of the best.
Well, very, very quickly, we're going to, I said, time's running out. I know there was a great story in there that Chicago hadn't had a hit for many, many years. And they went to him with tracks for album 16, Chicago 16. And he listened to them and he binned them. And he went, I'm not producing these. And then they came up with All Their Inspiration, Hard Habit to Break. He did a great, the I Am Earth, Wind and Fire album with After the Lover's Gone. They wrote that with Jay Graydon years before, and that never had a hit with it. Anyway, that's Kevin,
but what you just said, look at the power. I mean, when you've got those ears and you know what it is, right? Look look what he did to those albums and those bands with those songs and that generation. Boom, right?
Yeah,
changed the world, right? Isn't that amazing?
Absolutely. Kevin, a quick question from you.
Yeah, this week's question from this side of the pond is from Pam in Bon Air, Virginia, who asks, and this is for you, obviously, Brian. You have recorded cover versions of songs from the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Cole Porter, Herbie Hancock, Miles Davis, Henry Mancini, Alan and Marilyn Bergman, and Jimmy Page, to Strauss, Beethoven, and Ravel. What other songs or artists are still in your bucket list, or who would you like to cover or collaborate with in the future?
Oh my God, that's almost an impossible question to answer because it would be so many. You know, it's like the thing about music that's incredible. I mean, look at it this way: there's only 12 notes, right? There's only 12 notes. So when you think of every amazing song that's ever been written, you know, in Western music is 12 notes. So whether it's, Beethoven or Ravel or, the Goo Goo Dolls or, AC/DC, it's 12 notes. It's the same 12 notes, So there are so many people that it would be really, neat to do something with. I mean, one guy that just popped into my mind is I would love to do a duet with Willie Nelson. I'd love to hear his voice on my upright bass, to hear that voice. I did a thing with Sting once and it was incredible. I'd love to do more with Sting because that voice is so haunting, and that kind of register of his voice and my bass, the two, it would be just like, it's magic to hear those two together. But, as an artist, I'm open for anything and anyone, as long as somebody's bringing it to the table, I'm open to experience it, So it's a great question. The answer is limitless, but,
Good.
but it's neat that you're aware of all those different composers and people, that I did arrangements.
Okay. I've got a last question from one of our followers, Joanna from London. She says that because we have been speaking primarily about your wonderful bass playing, but of course you're also a massive producer as well. And apparently she's heard a story about when you drive a car, you like to hear a piece of music and you don't want to be sitting there adjusting the graphic equalizer. You want to hear it the way it was produced and that. And the great thing about yourself, when you listen to any of your records, you show total respect for all the musicians. There's so many albums, sax players and that, and all you could hear predominantly at the front is the sax player and the band are in the background. It's like, no, this is my album. And you have a wonderful way of blending everything in, and it's like you're respecting it. I saw Buddy Rich years ago, and when he played the drums, the whole musicians had to put their brass down and look at him and the rest of it. Brilliant drum. But he was like, no, this is the Buddy Rich big band, you listen to me. You have a wonderful way of blending and mixing it all together, but driving it. And I think I'm right in saying, this is Joanna again from London, am I right in saying that, because what she's saying is that when you record your bass, you don't go through an EQ, you go straight into the desk. You don't mess with it at all at that stage.
Well, you said a lot there, and it means the world to me when like what you said, and when people respond to when they listen to the music, and to listen to how everybody has a voice on my records, and that it's not just one thing, because a chain is as strong as its weakest link. And we're all in it together, and it's all about the musical experience. And even though it's my record and my music and my production, everybody on my record is bringing something to it that makes it what it is. It's not just me, it's everybody doing it. And I want to make sure everybody has a voice. When it comes to recording, I think, the less processing you do, the better, because it gives you more freedom to do processing afterwards if you have to. So I design my instruments. I work with a company called Kiesel Guitars. We've worked on the circuit board. We work on the pickups, all these different things. So basically when I record, I plug my bass in with no EQ, no effects, no nothing. It's literally straight in. I want to get as good and clean as sound as possible. And if you start at a high level, you don't have to do much. If it doesn't sound good going in, then you have to do all this work to try to sound good. And then you're like stacking stuff on top of each other. And the more things and the more EQ and the more stuff you bring in, the mix sounds worse, the more there's all this harmonic distortion and stuff like that. So I want it to be as clean and as pristine as possible. And I've always tried to do that. And it's really important. Another guy in the record business actually mentioned to me one day, and it really meant a lot. He's like, Brian, he's like, I listen to a lot of records and I'm driving around in my car. I listen to the radio and I listen to stuff. And he goes, especially with upright bass solos, he goes, anytime I hear a bass solo, I have to turn the stereo up and I have to change the EQ so I can hear it. He goes, when your records come on, I don't have to touch anything. And it was just like, that meant more to me than, I can't tell you what that means to me, because that means I'm doing my job as a producer. That is the producer listening. That's not the bass player. I make records as a producer. I just happen to be the bass player, and it's like, I kind of say I'm a human first, I'm a person first, musician second, bass player third. It's the same thing. When I make a record, yes, I'm the bass player, it's my record, but it's the whole experience. It's the whole music. You're listening to the music. You're not just listening to my notes. You're listening to everybody's notes. And everybody's got something to say. So I really try to make my records sound as even and as balanced as possible, making sure that the drive is there, that the funk is there, that the groove is there. But you hear everything. You hear the shaker. You hear the different things. You hear everything adds to the picture. You talk about Rembrandt. Everything adds to the picture. I want to make sure you hear absolutely everything. And one more thing, I can't stand it when you hear these guys and a lot of the smooth jazz sax players and some of the other people, it's just like over and over and over and over the same thing. Every song is like this. It's just like, it's like, okay, I get it. It's your record. It's great. you got a piano player in the band. Why don't you give him a solo? It's like, you got a guitar player in the band. It's like, how about a little breath of fresh air or something different? And it's just like, come on. It's like, give the listener a big experience, not just this myopic thing. Right. That, for me, that's what I like to try to do.
Well, I can say on behalf of and for Kevin, you do that, because on the Jazz Mood show, when I do my radio show here in the UK on a Wednesday night, the feedback I get, and people go, I loved it. What album was it? And I know Kevin on the Thursday night when he does the Smooth Jazz Train out of Richmond, Virginia, he has the same feedback. So you have accomplished that. You've done that, and we love your music.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, followers of Jazz Across the Pond, we're going to, unfortunately, time has beaten us. We're going to be wrapping this interview up. I could talk for another hour easily. There's so much to talk about.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Well, it's Brian Bromberg. It's a little driving music. We're going to finish off with an American-British band called Katrina and the Waves, who back in 1995 did a song called Walking on Sunshine. And due to the fact in the UK at the moment, we're having one day of sun, the next day rain. He can't make his mind about that. I don't know when to cut the grass and when not to. So it's a brilliant song from 1985. You've done a magic cover of it, featuring the wonderful Dave Koz on sax.
Yeah, he plays great on it. He really nailed it. I love the way he played on it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Look, we are in a time in this world where we need to smile and feel good, right? Walking on Sunshine. Is there anything more positive than that vibe? And also, it's just a great song, right? It's just a great song. And then you think about it, you think about the lyrics and you think about the vibe, and then you look at the original video, and then they're like this beaten up old dilapidated factory, and it's like completely different from what the vibe of the song is. But for me, it was like, this has got such a great hook, and it's so positive energy, and I was going to make it a little funky, and it came out great. It's really fun. Yeah.
Well, I've actually, on my disco career, I've been a DJ for coming up for 44 years now. So that song features most predominantly. If I want to get people on the floor, put that one on, and people on the floor, they're going for it. They're loving it.
It's impossible to not be in a good mood when you hear that song. It is impossible, right? Yeah.
Brian, we're going to say, before we say goodnight, have you got a last thought for everybody, first of all?
Well, I think what you guys are doing is fantastic, and it's been great. And thank you for inviting me onto the show. And, it's go out and support live music, as hopefully mankind gets healthier and we can go out, be responsible, wear a mask where you need to, but go support live music. And hopefully I can get across the pond and play, which would be wonderful. But, for us, recording the music is wonderful and making it is wonderful, but making it for you, making it for people in the audience. I view the audience as part of the band. So go support live music, and we can't do it without you. So you're part of it.
Perfect.
So go support it.
But when you come to the UK, promise me you'll let me know, because I will be front row to watch you.
Oh, my pleasure. Are you kidding me? Definitely. Yeah. Definitely.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been watching the wonderful, the fabulous, the incredible Mr. Brian Bromberg. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day today. And we can't wait. I love the album. Brian Bromberg, a little driving music. And say goodnight, Kevin.
Good night, Kevin.
Good night, Kevin.
And it's good night from me, from everybody here. Bye-bye.